End of life for 8 victims, 6 of them Asian women. The victims gunned down at 3 Asian massage parlors, a crime that the suspect says, instead of being racially motivated, was fueled by something else.
He does claim that it was not racially motivated. He apparently has an issue, what he considers a sex addiction, and sees these locations as something that allows him to go to these places, and it's a temptation for him that he wanted to eliminate.
Welcome back again. In the last 2 parts of this hopefully only 3-part series, we spoke about some biblical ideas of sex and how far away purity culture in the evangelical church is from that biblical basis of sex. And then we also talked about purity culture's racial past, as well as the way it deliberately burdens young women with the bearing of the brunt of the need to maintain their virginity for the sake of themselves and the men around them. And the result of all of that has left multiple generations disillusioned with the church's view on sexuality. Some pastors are coming to the conclusion that they must be the one to hold the line, maintaining that any young people they marry should not be living together. And other pastors are waking up and realizing that if they were to be that strict, they would never marry anyone under the age of 30 ever again. And it's in this tension that the church currently sits. How can the church reach out to a generation that is becoming increasingly secular while also maintaining the ideas of strict conservative sexuality? The answer is that while some more progressive denominations have backed off the purity culture conversation, along with other conversations around gay inclusion and things like alcohol use, the more conservative evangelicals have doubled down. If you watch the last part of this series, you may recognize this guy.
You talk about yourself as your daughter's boyfriend.
He was featured in mainstream news for his efforts to keep his daughters in purity balls, or these ceremonies where young girls would pledge their purity by signing contracts with their fathers. What you may not know is this guy is still around. He's even still working and preaching at the same church that his dad founded and handed to him.
Trans rights become civil rights, and once they become civil rights, then anybody who disagrees with them, or someone, say you hire.
And pastors that talk like old Ronald here, that have doubled down on purity culture, have begun to extend past the topics of men and women and gender roles, and now have moved on to bigger fish, like the exclusion of LGBTQ people from Christianity. But either way, pastors like this, which feed their congregations ideas about biblical masculinity and the subservient roles of women, have created an environment in our culture that leads these impressionable congregants of theirs to other, even more extreme voices. Which is why this...
If I'm the boss and I fire him because he's identifying as a woman or as a cat, I'm the one that's going to be fined. I am going to be taken to court, and my business will be sued, and maybe my livelihood destroyed because I identified him. He identified as one thing, and if he's fluid, he could be all those things in the same day. And I'm supposed to cater to this person in the work world. Now, this is going to create all kinds of absolute insanity just in the work world.
Sounds so similar in content to this.
If you want to chop your off, I have nothing against that. I'm not anti-gay. I'm not anti-transgender. I'm not anti any of these things. What I am anti is propagating your worldview on other people's children. If you're gay and you can't have kids, why do you now believe it's your right to go to other people's kids and tell them how to think? If you've decided that the type of sex you want to have will prevent you from procreating, that's your decision, right? You've decided that having sex with women isn't worth it for you. You don't want to have children. You want to have sex with men. Fine, your decision, and you're entitled to it. That does not give you the entitlement to go to other people's families who did decide to have children and raise them and try and program their children. Leave the kids alone. You can be as transgender as you like. Don't come talk to my kid about it.
There are very clearly grifters from outside their world of religion that have clung on to purity culture's idealizations, whether it's the promotion of masculinity, the desired male role as the head of the household, the subservient role of women, the traditional family values, the desire for racially segregated relationships, or maybe it's just the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric.
If you live 50 years as a man and then wake up on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. and decide you're a chick, you have a mental illness.
All of this is cultural war adjacent garbage, and it's found a place within the larger context of the quote-unquote traditional values that purity culture has been used to create and promote for decades now. And not only does the evangelical church hold a system of beliefs that leads to a right-wing radicalization, but they don't even half-heartedly attempt to distance themselves from these people.
Would you join me in welcoming our great friend and the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald J. Trump. Come on up, Mr. President.
And the result of this is that the lines are blurred between pastor and far-right advocate, so much so that pastors don't even need to illegally endorse candidates in an attempt to sway politics. They just need to be vocal about their quote-unquote religious ideology on LGBTQ people, or their stand against drag queens. You express these views, and everyone knows which candidate you're probably leaning towards. And likewise, these sort of non-religious, over-masculine figureheads know exactly which buzzwords to use to instantly activate their religious audience, and this cultivates an appearance of legitimacy in the religious world.
If you look at teachings from the Bible, it talks about husbands being gentle and kind to your wives, loving, providing, and it tells wives to be submissive to your husbands. Now, the word submit means to respect the authority of your husbands. Now, if you look at this, what does this really mean?
This will eventually result in theologian adjacent status, even when they are in reality just a dumbass with some supplements to sell, or books that are ghostwritten on their behalf, or doomsday prepping supplies, or who the fuck is buying this? Purity culture specifically results in less educated audiences by design, where the people who are being told about sex and their sexuality are purposefully being withheld information, either because of parental pressure on the church or because of the church leadership itself. And in doing so, they're creating young men and young women who are sexually repressed and simultaneously also vastly underinformed. These people will feel confusion and guilt and anger towards both themselves, but also sometimes towards members of the opposite sex. This once again leaves the door open to toxic masculinity or even sexual violence. It's no coincidence that there are more sexual assaults taking place among the people that claim to be the most vocal about sexual righteousness. People who are confused in their sexualities and have become so repressed that they can fetishize even the most basic physical interaction from the opposite sex. Then combine with other mental illnesses or social disorders, and this leads to extremes in sexual behaviors and even aggressions. Everyone knows the stereotype of the pastor's child being the wild one at the high school party, but we seem to forget that these unhinged stories of having unprotected sex at a party or committing to rampant substance abuse as a teenager can easily lead to an adult that is unable to grasp the concept of enthusiastic consent, for example, or unknowingly falls into a hate trap for women because they feel rejected by society's portrayal of them as being sex-obsessed, when in reality they just lack the sexual and social awareness to communicate with these women in the first place. And when it's not just the pastor's kid that's treated like an object of shame and regression, then you get full communities of these adult children who just simply do not understand how they fit in with the social fabric of our culture.
A stunning confession by a beloved pastor.
I committed adultery.
I was just 16 when you took my virginity on your office floor. Do you remember that? I know you do. You did things to my teenage body that had never and should have never been done.
She said she had been traumatized for 20 years by her experience at his hands. Then the woman's husband, Nate, joined in and held up some jewelry.
This was Bobby's covenant purity ring, which she wore while this man had sex with her, and she felt ashamed all these years.
These lines the church ends up walking are precarious. On the one hand, there's a claim of intention. The church claims to be for the protection of children, but much like helicopter parents that are married to youth pastors, overreach is sometimes more harmful than just letting be. If the church continues to double down on cult-like messaging about who is in and who is out of Christianity because of something as unknowable as your sex life, then the church will only continue to be more and more of a cult in general. We must resist the pressure to allow ourselves to be judged by the church, even as members of it. Do not settle for churches that promote hostile mindsets towards women and minorities, whether direct, like Ronald, or indirect, like many other evangelical churches. If the church as a whole in America is to survive at all, then these evangelicals need to be pushed away as the outcasts of society that they are, because these people in these pews will realize that their leaders are idiots, and they just need to see that there are other legitimate versions of Christianity out there. And more importantly, they need to see and learn about the concept of grace, which I believe exists in Scripture, and it extends to all members of the world, even ones that you do not think deserve it. Thank you everyone for tuning into the series. I hope you found something useful here. Subscribe for more ranting, and thanks for watching. Love you.